Welcome to the channel, and this is going to be a review of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, episode number 4. So this episode I really liked a lot. Um, there's not really any action per se in this episode, or very little of it until the end, but it's an interesting episode. So John and Jane are granted a day off, and they go spend it. Uh, I don't know where, but again, they're sort of living in, I assume it's New York City, and they go and do the typically New York thing of walking through the park in some farmer's market, and they're jaunting back and forth between them, verbal stuff like that. They're getting along a little bit better. Um, John actually runs into somebody that he used to date, which is a bit strange, but he does. Jane's a little bit jealous on it about that, but anyways, the woman takes off, and they're still wandering around. John goes to some drink stand, and somebody says, "John Smith, here's your order." He gets up to the counter, and it's the wrong order. So he starts sort of yammering at the attendant there that he's made a mistake, and the guy's a bit of an asshole. Is like, "No, I didn't." And then a guy walks up behind John and says, "He's John Smith." And you see a close up of his credit card, and his name is John Smith. So they start talking about things, and it turns out that this man is another John Smith working for the same agency. Now, I don't believe in coincidences, but they play it in this episode. Later on in the show, you find out that maybe it wasn't a coincidence that this other couple was sent to evaluate them or whatever. But they meet up, and they decide that they'll have dinner together. He'll bring his Jane and meet John's Jane, and they'll have dinner. So he actually meets Jane, but everybody's going to meet, and it'll be an opportunity for them to ask questions. So that's a good premise for an episode. They agree, and they're going to come over for dinner. So they're nervous. It cuts to them being in their apartment and getting everything ready, and then Jane and John show up, and they have it's a good scene of just them having ordinary dinner, and it's quite well written, and everybody, it's believable as just four people having dinner. But they do ask a few questions about what's expected and what's going on, and the new old Jane and John ask them how the intimacy is going and how they got over, meeting as strangers, because it looks like the other couple has been doing it for about 15 years, but they're only together for 5, so they got reassigned at some point, which they don't really go into it, but you kind of find out later on in the show that potentially that meant their partners got killed off. Anyways, they go through and they're having a good dinner, and they're talking about various things. Again, very well written. A scene is a dinner party, and they're starting to get a little bit hammered as they talk. Um, but eventually they start talking about, um, I can't remember how they do it, but they talk about the levels that they're at. So Jane and John, the ones that the show covers, are high risk, but the other old Jane and John are ultra high risk. And so they talk about the differences between this another version of low risk, which is basically the people who have been delivering packages with mission information are the low risk type, and they have a discussion whether they could actually do that or not, or whether they'd want to go um, to the upper high risk. And Jane thinks she wants to. John's not so sure, but he said he could do it. So, anyways, they eventually have to break up because apparently the old John and Jane are on a mission. So they just before they leave, they invite John and Jane along with them. So, it's a chance for them to see the ultra high risk. So they agree, and off they go. And they're all hammered, so that's not maybe the smartest thing, but that's what they're doing. Anyways, and they get to a helicopter pad, and John and Jane, our John and Jane, the ones about the show, get in the helicopter. They're all carrying a bunch of bags, and they go into the helicopter with the bags, and the old John and Jane just shut the door on them and said, "Yeah, you guys can handle it." So they kind of dumped them on on this mission. So off the helicopter goes. They're not 100% sure that they want to be doing this, but they fly off to, I don't know how far that helicopter could actually go, but they fly off and they're into the jungle. So that sort of suggests that it's in South America someplace. But they land and they have some kind of tracker. They were given a tracker by Jane, the old Jane, on the way, and they're using a tracker. And it doesn't occur to them that they're tracking somebody that potentially is actually a John or a Jane. But they get captured by a bunch of like rebels, young kids, and get taken to a cabin to meet whoever it is that they're supposed to meet with, and basically at that point it devolves into a fight where basically John, and you can see that it's got blood in this picture. This is the end of it. They're flying back, but they get into a fight, and he chops up the guy that they are meeting with a machete. So he's got blood all over him. Jane's got blood all over her, and they're kind of in shock. So they have no idea what's going on or what they were supposed to do or whether they got the mission or not. But they get a phone call from John and Jane, and it's like, yeah, okay, well, you guys did all the hard work, so we'll let you have all the money. Basically, still no explanation of what's going on, but that's it. So they get back home, and they don't know what to feel about it. It's a very good episode that way, and they don't know what to feel about it. They don't know anything. This is one of my favorite episodes so far because you get the interplay of the characters at the party and the first meeting and whatever, and then the shock to John and Jane about what they just did. And they end up basically saying how much of an asshole the old John and Jane are, and they're all the stuff that they lived with when they first were having dinner, but now suddenly there's this a weird thing about it. But that's the end of the episode. So again, not a lot of action in it. Well written dialogue, very good written scenes, lots of good reaction between all the players. A good episode on the show. Okay. So still, I'm very high on this show. I hope there's a second season because I'm really enjoying the first season. Thanks. And I think you will too. Thanks.